Hello everyone. Welcome to Scarlet Tower, which is a survivors-like. I think that's what they're calling the genre now, is survivors-like. Which means it is fairly similar to Vampire Survivors. We're going to be playing as this fellow, a vampiric character. He creates a blood wave with a scarlet sword that deals 25 damage and drains 0.25% of the damage dealt. And I have a lot of other perks and abilities and whatnot equipped that increase the amount of health we gain from damaging enemies. This game has many, like so many different kinds of currency to keep track of. And as a result, the RPG mechanics and the upgrade trees are of far more focus than they are in Vampire Survivors. Unlike Vampire Survivors, we can aim our attack with the right stick. That's what that little cursor is. Also, unlike Vampire Survivors, you might immediately notice it's much prettier. I also personally think it sounds nicer. And it's mostly in the visual effects. It's not that the sprite work is necessarily that much prettier, but the visual effects, I think, really bring it together. The fog, the glow, the magical aura of the spells. It all just really pulls you into the world, I think. Avarice Touch will increase the distance from which we can pick up experience, which is always useful. Just like Vampire Survivors, you do have to physically grab the experience. See, move speed or more Avarice Touch? More Avarice Touch for now. We want to level up early as much as possible. So that red shockwave that appears around us and then erupts, that drains health from enemies as well and kills them. Like I said, I have as many perks and abilities equipped as possible to drain health from enemies. We also, let's see here. Corruption Robe, this is like the equivalent to the garlic, I think. Anyway, yeah, that little purple circle around us. A very lovely shade of purple, I might add. So, you might have noticed these little floating guys with green borders around them hovering near us, who aren't hurting us. Those are minions. Every time we defeat an enemy, there's a chance that one of them will spawn. And each time one spawns in, we get a little barrier added to our health bar. That's what that little white bip is on the left side of our health bar. I think this little event we stepped in here, this event trigger, puts us in a barrier that makes us invincible for a bit, which might be super useful during a boss fight, but we're not in a boss fight right now. The bosses and mini-bosses come much less frequently in Scarlet Tower than in Vampire Survivors. Yes, we want to upgrade our Scarlet Sword as immediately and as many times as we can. It is our primary method of offense, after all. Something else that's distinctive in Scarlet Tower is the way the enemies move. The enemies have a much wider turn radius in this than they do in Vampire Survivors, which makes them significantly easier to avoid than the enemies in Vampire Survivors. More Avarice Touch. Gotta focus on leveling up early when the game's still pretty easy. I don't know if there are item combinations and I don't know if they stack in special ways like they do in Vampire Survivors. Each time we level up, we get to choose from 3 items, or we get to upgrade one of the items we already have, but there are always 3 choices, like this. Now our Avarice Touch is at max power. And that's sort of like the big appeal, you know, is that you never know what you're going to get each run. It offers different items each time. So you have to make your build in real time. Sort of like card games. I guess you can't really build a deck before you begin either. But you can go in with different abilities. Like, I don't have to have henchmen. These glowing henchmen around me. There's something I chose to have. If you don't want henchmen, you don't have to have them. I just like having them around. I think it adds a bit of flair to the game. And makes me feel more like a true vampire to have thralls, you know, minions running around doing my bidding. Though I guess they're not actually exactly doing my bidding. They're just occasionally attacking enemies. Ooh, what's this? 14 seconds, summon 3 darkness spirits around you. Each spirit deals 5 damage. That's neat. I do want the crown. I really want the crown. But we've got to be prudent. We've got to be prudent about this. Got to upgrade the Scarlet Sword first. Survivability, and then the purple crown. It better be purple at least. The corruption robe is purple, so I don't see why the crown wouldn't be purple. And we all know purple's the best color. So this is actually kind of a tough choice. The Ectoplasm wand is pretty good. It's like a boomerang sort of projectile. But having more max HP increases survivability long term. The shield first. We're really investing in the long term, though. Which means we might get overwhelmed because we're making so few choices that increase our offensive power right now. Every 10 seconds, create a blast hub. Let's see. More corruption robe, power gauntlet. We do want a little more damage if we can get that. The enemies aren't putting up much fight right now, but when we get to the mini-boss and boss characters, that'll change real quick. In this game, the mini-boss and boss characters actually have proper attacks that you need to worry about dodging, unlike in Vampire Survivors. Then again, Vampire Survivors has gotten a lot of updates since I played it last. Maybe that's changed too. Scarlet Sword all the way upgraded. Now we shoot 2 massive waves out of it, which is what we wanted. This is what I wanted. Getting the Scarlet Sword to max is a top priority. Let's see, what's this time? You see, it keeps feeding you new upgrades constantly, just like Vampire Survivors, which is part of why it's so addicting. And it doesn't even cheat or anything to get this addicting. You know, it's still an actual game with real gameplay. There are no microtransactions. It doesn't make you feel bad for playing it. Wall of Flowers, much similar to Vampire Survivors. Maybe a little bit too similar to Vampire Survivors. But I feel like this game still has many other things going for it that are distinctive. Like, I'm not saying you can't have a border, a ring of enemies that locks you in, because that's a fun design challenge. You want a way to limit the player's movement, so that way they have to prove that they're capable of actually dodging the enemies coming toward them. And I understand that, you know? But it probably didn't have to be flowers, just like the first level in Vampire Survivors. Maybe you could have picked your own enemy type for that. And I will hand it to this game. You know, there's a big gag in Vampire Survivors that there are no vampires. You spend the whole game looking for vampires and they're just not in the game. This game front loads the vampires. I'm playing as a vampire right now. In general, Scarlet Tower a little bit less memey than Vampire Survivors. Vampire Survivors leans pretty hard into memes and subversions and tongue-in-cheek humor. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, you know? That's not something to necessarily criticize about Vampire Survivors. But it's not to my taste, personally. Then again, you know, we actually don't know anything about the story of Scarlet Tower. Like, I didn't see a single scrap of information about the characters or the setting or the goal or anything, either inside or outside of the game. So it might be just as memey, and we don't know yet. Oh, the mini boss is here. I didn't even notice it first until he started playing his funny noise. He summons little rings, little AoE rings that damage us. We killed him successfully. Lucky Charm increases luck by 6. I don't want it. I don't want it. Just straight up deny that gift. Corruption Robe now at max. A lot of people might take issue with the way I play Survivors Lakes. Like, it's all about creating and optimizing a build for survivability until, like, you know, a lot of people will tell you the game's about steamrolling the enemies, but that's only because you get one of two options. You either steamroll the enemies or you get steamrolled. I don't want the knife either. Thank you for the suggestion. Let's see. This will probably come back to bite me later, focusing so much on ignoring so many offensive items, I should say. But we'll see how it pans out. It just, but yeah, this game, it just feels better to me, not just because I can actually aim my attacks, but, I mean, to be fair, you can aim attacks in Vampire Survivors, just aim them by moving. But I do like the ability to shoot where I'm pointing, is what I'm saying. If you don't want to personally manually aim your attacks, you can turn that off as well, and it'll just work like it does in Vampire Survivors. But I like the option. But yeah, having that option and the wider turn radius on the enemies, the improved graphics, the new music, like, it still feels a bit like an expansion to Vampire Survivors, more than a completely original product. But it's enough that a preference can be made. And I do prefer this to Vampire Survivors. Just for the aesthetic, I think. There's also a dodge move that I've used a couple times now. This right here, this dodge move. It's useful for boss fights. I don't want to downplay its usefulness, but it does not give you invincibility frames that I'm aware of, not by default. And so it is very, very easy to accidentally dodge into enemies or attacks with it. Very easy to screw yourself over. So, you know, be careful. I've made a couple of mistakes using that thing. Let's see here. I think it's finally time for the Corruption Crown. As promised, I will be disappointed if it's not purple. I really, so actually saw, there are a few, yeah, it's definitely, look at how purple that is. That's unbelievably purple. That's the purplest death orb I've ever seen. Look at the beautiful purple trails, too. I need to focus on the gameplay. I'm not focusing on the gameplay. I left so much experience behind. I was saying something about this game. Oh, yeah. I've heard people complain about the trees, how it's difficult to see the enemies or maneuver yourself around the trees. I disagree. I've never really had a problem with it. The enemies glow red when they're behind the trees. The trees are very, very visible all the time. Like, they're a hazard, sure. But they only get in the way insofar that you have to move around them. And I don't think that's much difficulty as long as you have spatial awareness. I don't mean... That was a bit meaner than I meant it to sound like. I'm not saying you are completely lacking in spatial awareness if you don't manage to see it or navigate the trees properly. But I do think that enhanced spatial awareness that comes with hyper focusing on what the game is putting on screen helps with that. Have to be attentive is what I'm trying to say. It's a lot of words to say that you have to be attentive. But you know, sometimes people say stuff wrong. Oh, sure. More Corruption Crown? Don't mind if I do. Sometimes words just come out wrong. And that's part of being human. I've brought it up before, but that's actually something that I find quite distasteful in fictional media, is that in most of our fictional media, characters speak perfectly. They have perfect eloquence. They say the right things in the right cadence all the time. And that's just not how people are. I would greatly prefer more art where characters stutter, or they have issues articulating their points properly, you know, like real people do. But that art is very, very uncommon. I can think of a few examples. Looks like the Corruption Crown is already maxed out, or will be next time. Yeah, no, it's maxed out now. More purple is better. I do not regret getting the Corruption Crown at all. If I could make every attack as purple as the Corruption Robe and the Corruption Crown's abilities, that would be great. I do also, I will readily admit, the glowing blue crystals, probably a very, very big determining factor in my affection for this game. Because purple and blue are my favorite colors, and that's a great shade of purple and a great shade of blue, and they glow so pretty. It's a very surface level love I have for Scarlet Tower, I guess you could say. But you know, any preference is a preference. I like this because it has more purple and blue in it. I mean, I guess Vampire Survivors experience crystals are also blue, but you know, when I look at the crystals in Vampire Survivors, I'm not like, ooh, pretty blue, like I am here. So, oh, the werewolves are coming. Here they come. It's werewolf time. Also, these green glowing bugs will explode when they touch us. They're much more dangerous than the werewolves. The werewolves also drop these fuchsia-looking crystals, which are pretty in their own right. Let's re-roll. Sure, let's get the Thunderstaff. I like the Thunderstaff. Being able to summon down lightning to smite your foes, very satisfying. Is it a particularly useful ability? No idea. I don't really optimize these games, I think, the way most people do. I just play them to play them, and that's it. And I'm not saying that it's wrong to optimize them, or, ooh, a salesman, or any such thing. It's not like I'm making zero strategic decisions. I like strategizing. It's just like when I play Yu-Gi-Oh, though. I choose what I think would be fun to play with first. Like, I really, really like the Scarlet Sword's giant 2-wave attack. Let's see here. More Thunderstaff. So, the salesman down there, we can purchase from him using Hunter points, which I assume we get from killing enemies. Which is good, because that's the primary thing you do in this game, is kill enemies. 10 minutes left. Around the 8-minute mark, I think, is when the boss spawns. Let's see here. More Thunderstaff. I can't really tell how much good the Corruption Crown is doing, but I want to believe that the pretty purple orbs swirling around me are doing a lot of damage. I want to believe that. I never would have made any other choice. Like, I had to know if they were purple, and they are very purple. I don't remember if there's anything particularly threatening about the new ghost enemies showing up. Like, all of them have something to watch out for, I feel like, but I just don't remember. We want to get as close to 8 minutes as possible, and then we'll see if we can buy anything of use from the vendor. But we do want to at least visit him to see if he has anything good for us, because there's no harm in checking, even if we can't afford anything. You're probably seeing now what I meant about the enemies having a wider turn radius than in Vampire Survivors. I am much more easily walking around them in circles than you'd be able to in Vampire Survivors. Which also probably helps with experience gains. It might. I haven't really, like, made a test of it or any such thing. The trees also inhibit the enemies as much as they inhibit you, so that's... I don't know, I think the trees are kind of valuable, honestly. I did pass up so many offensive options. We'll see if it pays off. Because it's... Oh, here's the boss. We gotta get out of here. Alright, buddy. What do you got to sell? Frost Sword every... Ooh, what's that? Every 10 seconds, create a Frost Sword that deals 200 damage. Every 0.5 seconds, kills enemies. Yes, absolutely. That sounds great. Give it to me. So, I think this guy's called the Puker. It's not my fault he's called that. He pukes things. That's why he's called the Puker. And his puke hurts a lot. It drops acid everywhere. It drops acid everywhere. It is extremely dangerous. Thankfully, we heal ourselves through our attacks, so we can survive for a bit, even if we get hit by it. But it is not to be trifled with, that's for sure. Also, there's some secondary buffs, like that big red aura that kills enemies and heals us. If an enemy walks into that, then, sorry, if a boss walks into that and gets this one right here, if a boss were to get damaged by that, we get an attack buff of 50%. So that's pretty neat. I like that. See if we can keep steering the boss into the ice sword. Something made a very pleasant noise just a moment ago. I think it might have been a chest spawning. Yeah, that is what that is. See if we can get to it. We want to keep moving because this guy's spit has a surprising range on it. Darkness cloak. Every 14 seconds summons 2 darkness spirits around you. Will that replace... Oh, it's a fusion? What does that mean? Let's get it. I assume that by fusion, that means it's the darkness cloak and the darkness crown combining into something. Something that's still purple, it appears. So that's good. Hopefully these purple wisps are stronger than the other ones, because we did lose our cloak. So that does answer the question. Yes, there are item and weapon combos, absolutely. We just saw one. Much like in Vampire Survivors. I've said the words like Vampire Survivors a lot. It draws to mind, early on, after Minecraft first made it big, there were a lot of Minecraft likes, and a lot of people weren't sure what to call them, Minecraft clones or what have you. But eventually, they grew into their own respected genre. And that's why I think, like, even if right now, a lot of people are still making comparisons to Vampire Survivors when they see these games, myself included, they will grow... Oh, we can get the Corruption Robe back? Okay. And we get to keep the Darkness Crown? Alright, best of both worlds, I guess, because I definitely did want the little purple barrier back. Thanks for letting me have both. But anyway, even if people are making a lot of comparisons inevitably to Vampire Survivors right now, and I'm doing that as well, I think eventually the genre will grow to a point where it's just respected as its own thing. Like, you don't hear people call FPSs Doom-likes anymore. You don't hear people call voxel sandboxes Minecraft-likes so much anymore. MOBA is a genre. And there is a lot of room for this genre to grow, I feel like. So I don't know, like, even if this is not one of my favorite games or anything, it's pleasant. It looks pleasant, it sounds pleasant, it's fun to play. The biggest problem for me with games like this is that more and more lately, I've struggled to get into games with incremental progress mechanics. Like, a huge part of the point in this game is that you do a run, you grind a bit, you get a little stronger, you go back in. This time maybe you'll beat the boss or beat death or whatever. And that sort of gameplay loop isn't as appealing to me as it once was. Like, I'd much rather play a game that's about 30 minutes long, and it be a really great 30 minutes, than just keep replaying a level over and over to get a little bit stronger each time. Like, I've replayed Super Kiwi 64 a bunch. And each time I get a little better at the movement, I understand the mechanics a little better, I go a little faster, I do new stylish things I hadn't before. It's fun. But there's no incremental progress, you know, I don't unlock new things, I don't get experience points that go towards something bigger or better. And I think that that's fine. I much prefer games where it's the player's skill that ultimately determines enjoyment, and not numbers going up. Not that the numbers going up can't be determined by the player's skill, but in this case, like in the case of a game like Scarlet Tower, I think no matter how bad you are, or how many times you die early on, if you go at it enough, you'll inevitably get the right items and the right upgrades to succeed. I think that while skill does play a factor inevitably in a game like this, it can be supplanted. Might as well go all in on the Frost Sword. I don't have any delusions that we're beating death today. I have no such delusions. I do like that the Frost Sword spawned at the entrance of this clearing, though. That was pretty cool. But yeah, you can see the enemies are getting stuck on the trees. The trees really seem like a benefit as much as a hazard to me. And this is the part of the level where it's just oops, all werewolves. The very end of the level is very, very one note because of how many werewolves filled the screen after you defeat the Puker. The reason for this is probably because, you know, they didn't know whether you would be able to beat the Puker by this point. So they didn't want to overwhelm you with too many different enemy types. So they just gave you a simple one to work with. Oh, here's Death. Death himself. Again, don't have any delusions that we're winning against Death today. Like, we have to live for another 2 minutes and 39 seconds. And that's just to survive, like, not actually beat him or anything. Yeah, there we go. Anyway, that was Scarlet Tower. I probably accidentally called Scarlet Tower Vampire Survivors a couple times. I apologize if that happened. Let's see. Recommended. What does that mean? What do you mean you recommend this upgrade? What does that mean? I'm not sure if I like that. Like, the point is to be able to choose your own build, so I'm not sure I like the idea that they're recommending upgrades. Anyway, that's Scarlet Tower. It looks pretty. It's chill. I think it's kind of fun to play.